Welcome to the GTM Dialogues podcast. GTM Dialogues is a platform built to support B2B startups on their journey to scale. We have a simple mission, and that's to help founders to make a bigger impact. We're proud to have a community today of over 1,000 founders who are part of our network. Whether you're just starting out or you're looking to scale, this is the place to learn, connect, and grow. Join us here on the podcast or at one of our live events as we talk to top industry experts, we share insights, and we guide you through your go-to-market journey. So, very warm welcome to Chara from RevenueHero. Fantastic to have you here on the GTM Dialogues podcast. Very excited about learning more about your GTM journey and the advice and inputs that you can provide to other founders.
Yeah, great to be here, Chris. Excited to get into stuff that keeps us going every day.
Fantastic. So just for anyone joining who's not familiar with RevenueHero, do you want to just give a quick introduction to yourself and to the product?
Of course. I'm Chara. I have a longer, slightly confusing Indian name as well. That's Charanyan, one of the co-founders of RevenueHero. So what RevenueHero does is it helps you with a B2B scheduling and routing platform, and with the best option out there for marketers and ops folks in GTM organizations, because we automate the process of qualification, routing, and getting meetings booked from all your channels, right? Whether that's a web form, it's a link in your email campaign, right from within your web app. In all these places, we completely remove the friction of a qualified hand raiser trying to book a meeting on your sales team. No emails, no back and forth, instant qualification, routing, and meeting scheduled right on the calendar.
Cool, fantastic. If we can begin at the very beginning, the early GTM, what we always say is that you always start with founder-led sales. Like the initial sales are always founder-led, and then from there you start experimenting and trying new things. Can you just take us through that journey of from how did the first sales that weren't founder sales start coming in, and what were the initial thoughts about what the GTM setup would look like?
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. The first few sales were founder-led, and in our case, we're a 6 co-founder company. Maybe a story for another time. So it's founders-led, and just 6 founders trying to introduce RevenueHero to the world and bring the deals in. That was fun. But once we realized that we need to start scaling this, get outside of our network, we took the unconventional approach to say, hey, it's typically, build your brand, make sure that, you start doing outbound first. We did the opposite to say, hey, we have a world-class product. We're in a slightly crowded category. So we'll go to market with performance marketing, right? So we just want to get word about RevenueHero out there. So our first experiment, in fact, was Google Ads, right? I know there's a lot of investors and founders cringing at that, but the thought process was, we have a great product. We've conducted enough customer interviews to know that there is need for an alternative to the incumbents in the market. And we just wanted to put word out there that, hey, you have an alternative that's worth exploring. And that's how our first non-founder-led sales happened. And, existing solutions were, not meeting requirements, and we're slightly getting stale in terms of how quickly features are being shipped and so on. Right? So the reason for that context is when we went to Google Ads as our first channel, we started out with a brand campaign. What I mean by that is bidding on, your competitors' brand searches, where the intent is already there, right? Like that they're problem aware, they're solution aware, and they're now probably looking for alternatives, or they're looking for the incumbent who's already created the demand, and you're now just capturing that demand, right? So in terms of cost, and we did have existing demand created by another player in the market, and competition is always good, right? It makes customers, it gives customers choice, and we wanted to give them the choice, and we said, hey, you're looking for this product, but you're not stuck with that as the only. It's not options choice. You actually have a better product in the market. We just not yet as well known, but we're equally good, right? So we started by bidding on our competitors' brand keywords. And one of the things that we were very conscious of when we did that was we didn't come out bashing our competition saying, hey, the product's absolute trash, this doesn't work, that doesn't work, none of that. Our initial approach to Google Ads on our landing page content was we exist, right? These are the you're searching for this product, but you have an option, and these are all the features that we provide, and these are all the problems that we solve. Not a single word about our competition on that page, right? We didn't say why we're better than them. We just said we exist, right? And these are the things we solve, and some of the things we do well. So if that's your situation, of course, I'll preface all of this by saying you need a world-class product for this marketing strategy to work, right? Easier said than done, but I was lucky to have that. So we started off bidding on brand, Google Ads, and the experiment proved to be worth the spend.
It's interesting. And when you got through to the sales, I mean the end sales process, was there an amount of competition replacement, or was most of the new business kind of greenfield customers? So people who were doing this for the first time, they initially looked for the better known competitor and then discovered you.
Yeah, I would say that in the initial 5 to 6 months, there was a lot of replacements happening, right? Where they were already with the competitor. Like I said, in our case, might be unique to our case. They hadn't had a lot of features released in the last few years. So the product was getting stagnant, and there were a lot of frustrations with the existing product. So I would say that there was a healthy, significant amount of replacements, right? But there were also cases where they were looking for the competitor, not yet using them. So we just got into head-to-head evaluations, and we just ended up winning those deals, right? But in the first few months, it was mostly replacing the incumbent. And given the nature of our product, what we also did was offered complete white glove service to get the implementation done by our team so that their workflows are intact. So there's a really famous Jason Lincoln post out there saying, hey, if you really want me to switch vendors, don't tell me that it's a zero cost, zero friction process, because you're not considering the amount of admin hours that goes into this, right? Nobody considers that cost. So that made we were really conscious about that. So we put in our hours, made sure we replicated the setup, and then made the switching process really easy.
So if we look at where you are today, can you just do of your sort of new pipeline or new revenue, just do a percentage roughly breakup between different GTM activities? What's sort of SEO inbound, outbound, maybe partnerships, events, or other sources?
Yeah. Before I jump into that, I started reminiscing when you spoke about the contributing to communities versus jumping straight in, right? So the funny thing about the communities we're part of is they have a really strict policy around that. So if you try doing that, they actually mark you with skunk emojis to say, hey, that's not the content we want, right? So one of the things that we did early on, and I continue to do, is I just ping the founder of the community whenever I see a potential conversation around our product to get guidance on, hey, how should I approach this, right? I know, like, I'm really, really passionate about this problem. I want to suggest my product, but what do you suggest? How do I approach the conversation? And you can always try doing that, right?
That's a fantastic idea, because the founders or the moderators usually have a really good pulse of what the community will enjoy, what they will resist. So getting that type of input, and it's also a good way of sort of demonstrating to that founder or that moderator that you want to be a valuable part of the community, that you're not just there to grab leads.
Yeah. So getting back to your question about the split, right now I would still say that performance marketing does a lot of heavy lifting for us. Only that the split has moved away from just a competitor brand campaigns to more generic campaigns, and we've just branched out on which competitor we go after, right? Because there's a lot of bigger players getting into the market, right? We'd like to think, hey, RevenueHero got them all interested, but whatever the reason is just across companies, public startups, we're seeing revenue acceleration and just the fight for every single dollar becoming more intense and harder, which is what we like to assume is the reason as well. So more campaigns contributing in terms of performance, still doing a bit of heavy lifting. Outbound has started kicking in, which is a result of our brand starting to grow. Because one of the things we realized was I genuinely hate being known as the alternative, right? Who's Revenue Hero? Somebody else's alternative just doesn't have a great ring to it, and don't want to be known as that.
Yep.
Yeah, so we started hosting our own virtual events and webinars where we just bring revenue leaders together, talk about their struggles, their learnings, what's going well, what isn't, right? And spin that content out, share it with folks, and have Revenue Hero be associated to that rather than to another brand, right? To somebody else's brand. And so that's contributing to outbound as well. And we're back to trying out events this year. In fact, we're at inbound, we're at SaaSter, and we're just attending. We're also trying to host small dinners and things like that. That's an experimental channel which hasn't yet contributed, right? But
some SaaS companies will make an enormous fuss, weekly product launch announcement. Some, it's a quarterly or a 6-monthly release. Are you able to use that flow of features coming out as as something to keep building buzz about the product?
Yeah. So one of the things with I would say our ICP, Chris, is there definitely is merit to signaling that your product is constantly growing, and that causing folks to start evaluating your product, right? Definitely merit to that. But one of the funny things about our ICP is they just want 4 wheels on the cars to run, right? Like it's okay, it's great to have an awesome speaker and all the jazz, but as long as we're able to listen to them continuously and just keep building what they're asking for, at least so far, we've seen that that's what brings them to evaluations and makes them talk about us in forums. But we have had instances where our newsletters went out with our product features and conversations have started. But one of the things about selling to marketers is that they have a really high bar for bullshit detection, right? Apologies for the French, but it's really hard to get them to open a newsletter and a product update because they know, why we're doing it. So we're trying to, tweak the way we do it. We use a product called Pylon that allows us to broadcast messages in Slack because we use Slack for support for all our 250 plus customers.
Right.
Right. So it's easier to get that message delivered, and that generates conversations. But yeah, just by virtue of who we serve, getting them to open that product update newsletter or that email is slightly
definitely
hard.
is definitely tough.
Yeah.
You mentioned the way you're able to capture, I guess, the voice of the customer through sort of service and pass that on to product.
Mhm.
Are you also able to have that, I guess, the customer voice coming through to your marketing and to your product marketing teams? Like, do you have internal processes to make that work?
Yeah. So one of the things we do is we have a channel called Customer Love, right? So anytime we hear what's working really well for customers, like I said, right, it's the lost in translation that affects marketing and product in a lot of companies. So whenever we hear great things about our product come from customers, we quickly take a screenshot of that, we post it in Customer Love. Of course, it makes for a great moment where the product team feels good and they all react. But the primary driver behind that is to use customer language to talk about features wherever possible. So the marketing team is always looking out for those notifications, and wherever possible, they just pick up those lines and we try to translate it into our product marketing collateral or whenever we talk about the feature on our website, right? And we also use Fireflies for our call recordings, right? So whenever customers get on evaluation calls, setup calls, whatever it is, and we've set up an automation where once the call is done, we get a notification in a channel called Customer Call Recordings. And Fireflies gives you a nifty little summary of the call with the bulleted highlights. So our marketing team is always on top of that as well, right? So the other thing we also try to do is, I wouldn't want your podcast to not have AA in the transcript. So the other thing that we do is we use Fireflies APIs to bulk download call recordings and kind of de-anonymize it, and then use ChatGPT or Claude to identify what topics are coming up repeatedly, what kind of problems are customers talking about, right? And kind of get those points extracted and then use it in our website, in our collateral as well.
Do you do anything in ABM? Do you have a set of maybe like the larger enterprise accounts that you're trying to look at in a more integrated sales plus marketing approach?
Yeah. So interesting that you asked that, Chris, because one of the things that we did was, like I said, we're heavy on performance. So we had a list of 15,000 companies that we're going after in terms of a LinkedIn audience. And after a year, we realized that, hey, we need to do a refresh. So what we did was we downloaded all our paying customers, right? Created lookalikes of those customers, figured out which industry of customers close fastest, right? And which customers give us the most highest ACV, right? So what we're doing,
renewed.
yeah. So what we did was, and of course, who renewed, yes, right. So who stuck around for longest, right? So based on all those factors, Chris, what we're doing is for the folks who convert really quick and have smaller ACVs, create buckets to create LinkedIn ads again, but with specialized messaging and logos relevant to them, right? So they go back into performance marketing, business as usual, right? Now, folks with high ACVs and lower conversion time periods, right? So if the deal closes in like 12 days, right? But the ACV is north of, let's say, 10 to 15K, we're creating ABM campaigns for folks like that, right? Because we just want to be in front of these folks, get those deals in faster. So we are doing ABM, but our ABM campaigns are more based on, hey, what types of customers already know, buy, and enjoy RevenueHero, and who we solve the problems really well for. Let's pick giants in those spaces, create messaging that's very relevant to them, and then start ABM activities where messaging very specific to those companies, and then our outbound efforts are also aligned to that. And right, that's our approach for ABM.
And is there any set of customers where like maybe they're really large accounts and it's going to take time, but you just want to be there in front of them consistently?
Yeah. So there are specific logos where we know it's going to take time, like you mentioned, right? And in fact, we have had conversations like that where they evaluated us last year, right? Because, like I said, brand campaigns brings them at least to the conversation, and then they chose to renew with our competitor, right? But we were always in front of them across channels. Like our outbound emails were always very, very subtle, where we just say, hey, we had this conversation 9 months back. The reasons you mentioned as, what made you stay with them were these, right? And these are the things that have changed in RevenueHero. Given that your renewal is coming up, these are the reasons for you to take a look at us again. And of course, we have them onto a custom audience on LinkedIn. So they're always seeing RevenueHero. They're always receiving our newsletters about we're hosting a virtual summit and here's what's new, right? But surround sound effects where you're surrounding that one particular logo you want to close is also definitely effective.
What are the metrics that you really look at, or the stages? Is it short enough that you just look straight at, how many people we're talking to that are closing, or are you tracking some of the intermediate stages as well?
Yeah. So with outbound, I'll start from the top. The first thing that we look for, based on outbound conversations, wherever you're able to get into a conversation, is the first thing we look for is one of three replies, right? One is not interested. The other is I'm already with a vendor. If that's the answer, we look for when the renewal date is, right? And the third is I'm not using anything. This is not a real problem for us, right? So we start there, and then from there we of course track time to get them to a qualified meeting, right? Or time to get them to a meeting, from first meeting to follow-up call, and then to POC, and then from POC to closure, right? So that's our tracking phases today, mainly because of the nature of our product. The time from first conversation to meeting booked is pretty short because the meeting scheduling is automated. But yeah, the metrics that we track are, if you reach out to 100 folks, how many of them are you able to get to give you one of those three answers, right? So that's the number we track. From there, how many get to a meeting, from the meeting to the POC, and then from POC to closure, or they just say, hey, we're going to stick to the existing vendor or solution.
And as you're selling to multiple countries, are you seeing any difference in your GTM approach or your messaging going from one market to another?
Yeah. So this is learning we've had from our previous lives at Freshworks, right? Where we used to sell to. So I used to be a solution architect for Europe, right? And before that, I used to be a sales engineer for US. So all those learnings definitely help. But to your question, Chris, I think in the US, folks are quicker to adopt product, right? There's not a lot of security conversations happening upfront, at least for your smaller companies. The quicker to experiment, get into the product, start playing around with it, and are ready to close much faster. When it comes to deals in Europe, of course, you have your data privacy issues coming up much earlier. You want to clear all those hurdles before you even get into product functionalities, right? Here, they want to know if the product does what it says it does. As long as that's good, they then get into conversations of, all right, just give me the checklist of security items so we can get this cleared by legal, right? So that's one of the things. So here we focus more on why we're better, what problems we solve. In the European markets, you of course have to focus on security and data compliance and things like that. And of course, things like translations, right, play a much bigger role in our European deals. Localization of the product, and you want to, understandably so, right? Like you sit out of Germany, but you sell to Portugal, you sell to all your European countries, and you want to make sure that the product does takes care of all of that. So our messaging is slightly heavier on that side as well. And in some areas of Europe, there is a lot of emphasis for whether you're a big enough brand, right? Like even if your product does really well, has a lot of differentiated features compared to the incumbent, there seems to be tendency to just go with the established, better known, bigger company. So there we try to associate ourselves with these communities, right? Like influencers in the space. So you appear bigger than you are. Right? Yeah, in Europe, that's the case. In US, because of all the startups, because of the slightly different mindset there, you don't really need to keep playing up your brand. You can rely solely on the strength of your product. So those are the major differences we've seen.
You mentioned Fireflies. Any other sort of tech stack tools that you want to call out, things that have really helped you over the years, or that things that you're experimenting with?
Yeah, definitely. So we started off using a tool called IP Info. It helps you do a reverse lookup of IP and associate it with geographies. What it helped with in our earlier days was to route customers to the right team. And then, of course, we built it into RevenueHero itself. But shout out to IP Info. It's a really awesome product. Right? If you want a free reverse IP lookup product, you should definitely try them out. So they're great. We use Pylon for our support. So because we provide support on Slack, we're able to respond back to customers in a matter of seconds and minutes. Pylon makes it really, really easy to do that, and you're also able to do like broadcasts of new features. Any vendor downtimes that you're facing, like if HubSpot goes down, the world's up in flames. So we quickly let our customers know that, hey, HubSpot facing trouble. Pylon makes it unbelievably easy. So definitely check out Pylon. We also use Fireflies, like I said, for all our call recordings. Let's see, Slack, of course, and we use Descript for our video editing. Really makes you look world class without too much effort in terms of the kind of output that you get. Screen Studio for a lot of our product screen recordings, right? They have really awesome zoom effects and just visuals that makes your product marketing look great. Riverside for our podcasts, right? The same one we're recording on. But yeah, that would, of course, I would be remiss not to mention RevenueHero for our inbound scheduling, right? Folks
Yes, of
book meetings
course.
using RevenueHero. Yeah, yeah, that's our setup. Webflow hosts our website.
Fantastic. I think it's just incredible, how many of these tools are, how many of these tools that are now key parts of your workflow are actually really new tools.
Yeah,
If you jump back even a couple of years, how difficult it was to make videos, edit videos compared to the ease at which you can do them now. It's remarkable.
yeah.
Final question, I guess, would just be your advice for for early stage founders who are trying to work through their GTM options. What would you suggest, or what approach would you suggest that they take in trying to run these experiments or explore different ways of shaping their GTM?
Yeah, the first thing that I would say is listen to all the advice that you get, but then doesn't necessarily mean that you have to follow all of it, right? Not to be rude, but it's very, very hard to get people to understand the context that's unique to your setup, right? So really internalize your context and what's unique about your market, your ICP, right? Not to sound too generic, but find where your buyers hang out, right? Spend your first few months doing just that, right? Get in front of those buyers. For some of you, it might mean flying out to the US, hanging out at events, right? Being part of trade shows. For some of you, it may just mean hanging out on a Slack channel, just listening to people talk. Figure out what that is, because everything stems from there, right? Because if you just start out with, hey, I'm going to use outbound as a channel, and if it's if the person that you're selling to is a developer who never opens their mailbox, right? That doesn't really work, right? So figure out where your buyers hang out, and all of this, of course, I'm going to preface with the fact that you know that you have a product that solves a really good problem, right? Or a really relevant problem, right? So figure out all of that, and just don't listen to best practices or truths, because there are none that apply to everybody, right? They're just like basics, like make sure that you actually have a product and you're not making things up. Like, of course, basic human decencies apart, there are no universal truths or best practices at your stage, because all of these best practices and truths come from enough data that just doesn't apply to you, right? Like when we started, folks said, hey, a 5% open rate or a 5% response rate is great for outbound. But that's probably based on companies who are sending like thousands of emails, and with so data points that are drastically different. For us, we got 70% opens, and that's all we cared about, right? Even if we didn't get replies, we didn't really care, because RevenueHero was getting a free top of the funnel channel in the form of outbound, right?
Yep.
Not to digress, but find out what truths apply to your setup, right? From there, build your GTM motions, right? And be open to experiments with other people cringe at or are completely against, right? Like for somebody who says, hey, Google Ads is just a waste of money, might be their truth, but not necessarily true for you. Be ready to quickly experiment, get your hands dirty. Like if you need Google Ads running as an experiment, be ready to spin up that landing page yourself, put content out there, and keep your learning cycles really, really short, right? And make sure not to measure against metrics that don't make sense for you, right? Like if you're running a Google ad, you probably need to measure how many people are first landing on your page and spending time on your page, rather than, hey, in my first month, am I getting 100K in pipeline through the Google ads, right? Just doesn't work, right? So be open to experimenting with all channels relevant to your ICPs. Keep those experiments short, keep iterating, and keep moving the metrics against which you measure it, would be my advice. Right? And if you're trying outbound, I would definitely say give outbound a shot. Keep refreshing the lists that you use for your outbound. Keep refreshing messaging. And that would be your cheapest channel for early day experimentation, because you're just spinning up a mailbox and going after your buyers, right? Don't be spammy. Don't send 200, 300 emails a day. But yeah, those are all the things that I would say are early stage experiments that you can run.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Chara. Thank you for joining us on the GTM Dialogues podcast. I think the insights that you've had on your journey and the suggestions that you've been able to offer for other founders are incredibly valuable. It's fantastic getting this sort of insight into a founder's mind on their own successful GTM journey, and wish you the best of luck for the year ahead.
Of course, it was great to be here, and Chris, I think we wish more content like this existed, right? When we started up, or even before we started up, because we probably would have started up much earlier. So I think content like this is really great, and I hope some of what we've spoken about is helpful for others as well. Thanks for having me.
I'm sure it will be. Thanks, Chara.